Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
There are moments in sport that the cameras capture perfectly and the internet destroys completely. March 8th, 2026, International Women's Day, Stadium 1 at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden in California. Two young women on opposite sides of the net. One of them, a 20-year-old from the Philippines, in the middle of the most dominant performance of her career. The other one of the biggest stars in all of women's sports, cradling her left arm, shaking her head, making the slow walk to the net to end the match. The embrace was genuine, the words were heartfelt, and within 60 minutes of it happening, the internet had already turned it into a crime scene. The word investigation started appearing before the players had even left the court. Accusations spread, screenshots circulated, videos got clipped and reposted with captions designed to make the ordinary look suspicious. And by Monday morning, the question being asked across tennis social media wasn't about Eala's incredible performance or Coco Gauf's health. It was whether the whole thing had been staged. Whether a two-time Grand Slam champion had faked a nerve injury on International Women's Day to avoid losing in straight sets to a Filipina 20-year-old who had just been routing her for 54 minutes. That is what the internet decided to argue about. And before we go any further, before we even get into the beauty of what actually happened on that court, we need to stare that accusation directly in the face. Because the truth matters. And the truth in this case is far more powerful than any conspiracy theory the internet could manufacture. But first, you have to understand the setup, because context is everything. You have to understand who these two women are and what was riding on this match before a single ball was struck. Coco Gauf, 21 years old, world number 4, two-time Grand Slam champion, winner of the 2023 U.S. Open, winner of the 2025 French Open, the first American woman to win Roland Garros since Serena Williams. She is not just a tennis player, she is a cultural figure. She is the face of a generation. She has been under a spotlight since she was 15 years old, when she walked onto the grass at Wimbledon and beat Venus Williams in the first round and made the entire world's jaw drop. The pressure she carries every single week on every court she steps onto is almost impossible to fully comprehend. And she carries it with a grace and composure that has made her one of the most respected athletes on the planet. And then there is Alexandra Eala, 20 years old, world number 29 from the Philippines, a player who 12 months ago was ranked number 140 in the world, a player who, in the space of one breathtaking, relentless, impossible-to-ignore year, transformed herself into one of the most talked-about names on the entire WTA Tour. A semi-final run at the 2025 Miami Open, where she defeated 3 former Grand Slam champions in succession. A crowd following at Indian Wells so enormous and so passionate that the line to get general admission seating for her first-round match stretched over 100 people deep. She hadn't just arrived on the tour. She had arrived in the conversation about the future of the sport. The backdrop to this specific match made everything more charged. 2 weeks earlier, at the Dubai Duty-Free Tennis Championships, Gauf had beaten Eala in the quarterfinals. And not just beaten her. She had dismantled her, 6-love, 6-2. A result so one-sided it barely qualified as a contest. Eala was open about it afterward. She acknowledged that Gauf had played exceptionally well. She acknowledged the margin. There was nothing to dispute. But that kind of result has a way of lighting a fire in a competitor. And when the Indian Wells draw placed these two back on the same side of the bracket in the third round, every single person following women's tennis understood what they were about to witness. The rematch. The rising star seeking to prove that Dubai was not the full story. The reigning French Open champion defending her status as one of the untouchable names at the top of the sport. International Women's Day. Stadium 1, prime time, the whole world watching. When the match began, it looked, very briefly, like we were going to get a replay of Dubai. Gauf broke Eala in the opening game. Clean, aggressive, authoritative. The crowd stirred. This was the player they expected to see. Purposeful, sharp, dictating the terms of the contest from the very first point. And then in the second game, quietly, invisibly, something changed. Nobody in the stands felt it. The cameras didn't capture it. The commentators didn't mention it. but Coco Gauf felt it. A sensation in her left arm that she would later describe in the most vivid, unambiguous terms imaginable. She said it felt like a firework was going off inside her arm, and then her whole arm felt like it was on fire. Not discomfort, not tightness, not the kind of minor ache that every professional athlete manages through every single week of a long season. Fire, fireworks, nerve pain so alien to her body, so unlike anything she had experienced in her career before that point, that she had absolutely no framework for understanding what was happening to her. She was 21 years old. She had been playing professional tennis for years. She had never felt anything like it. And she tried to continue. That is the part that needs to be said loudly and clearly, because the accusations that came later made it seem like Gauf had walked off at the first sign of trouble. She did not. She fought. She kept playing through the second game, the third game, the fourth game. She kept playing through the service games that were slipping away from her as her first serve percentage collapsed to 43.6%. She kept playing through the 7 double faults she produced in that opening set alone. 7 double faults compared to 0 for Eala. Her body was failing her in real time, in front of thousands of people, on one of the biggest stages in the sport. And she kept competing anyway because that is what champions do. You don't play through 7 double faults in a single set for gamesmanship. You play through them because you're trying desperately not to let the injury win. Meanwhile, Eala was playing the match of her life. Let's be absolutely clear about that, because everything that happened afterward with the injury and the retirement and the social media firestorm threatened to overshadow a performance that deserved to be celebrated on its own terms. Eala's first serve percentage sat at 68% throughout the match. She converted 5 of her 6 breakpoint opportunities. She broke Gauf's serve in every single service game of the opening set, all 4 of them. Her ground strokes were deep and precise. Her returns were relentless. Every time she sensed an opportunity in a rally, she stepped inside the court and took it without hesitation. This was not the same player who had been destroyed 6-love in Dubai 2 weeks earlier. This was a player who had gone back to the drawing board, studied what had gone wrong, made tactical adjustments, and then walked onto one of the most intimidating courts in tennis and executed her plan almost perfectly. Late in the first set, with Eala leading 5-2, Gauf took a medical timeout. A trainer came onto the court and worked on her left shoulder and forearm. The crowd watched. The commentators speculated. Eala waited, composed and professional, bouncing on her heels at the baseline, ready to keep going. After Gauf was broken in the final game of the opening set to hand Eala a 6-2 first set, play paused again while the medical staff wrapped Gauf's left forearm tightly in a compression bandage. She returned to the court for the start of the second set looking determined. The arm was wrapped. The set was lost. But she was out there, and she was going to compete. She lasted 2 games. Eala broke immediately to open the second set, and with the score at 2-love in Eala's favor 54 minutes into the match, Gauf made her way to the net. She leaned on it quietly. Eala was still in match mode, still tracking the ball, still in the zone that elite athletes find when everything is clicking. It was only when Gauf rested against the net that Eala turned, looked at her, and understood what was happening. The match was over. They embraced. And Gauf said the words that would be replayed thousands of times over the following hours. "I'm sorry, I hate to do this." Eala answered, "I hope you feel better." Final score, Eala wins, 6-2, 2-0, retirement. And then the phones came out. Here's the uncomfortable truth about modern sports in the age of social media. The moment a match ends in any kind of controversy or ambiguity, the narrative no longer belongs to the players. It belongs to the algorithm, it belongs to the comment sections, it belongs to the content creators who need a hot take ready before the hour is up. And on the night of March 8th, 2026, the internet did not choose grace. It chose suspicion. Within hours, the word investigation was everywhere. Fans pointed to the timing of the medical timeouts. They pointed to the placement within the set. They analyzed body language in slow-motion clips. Podcasts recorded emergency episodes. Tennis forums ran thread after thread, building cases out of coincidences and assumptions. And the specific allegation, stated openly and repeatedly, was that Coco Gauf had used a fake injury as a tactical tool to retire from a match she was going to lose. a deliberate strategic withdrawal designed to rob Eala of the full satisfaction of her victory and to protect Gauf's own reputation. Let that accusation sit for just a moment. A two-time Grand Slam champion, a player with an otherwise completely spotless professional reputation, a 21-year-old who has been competing at the highest level of the sport since she was 15, being accused of faking a nerve injury on International Women's Day, in front of thousands of fans on one of the biggest courts in the world, with cameras on her every second, while her entire team watched, while WTA officials watched, while the world's tennis media watched. That is what the internet decided was worth arguing about. And the people making this argument apparently did not wait to hear what Gauf had to say, because what she said in her post-match press conference dismantles every single piece of that theory completely. Coco Gauf did not hide. She walked into that press conference and she answered everything. She was raw and direct and honest, and she did not deflect for a single second. She explained that the pain had started in the second game of the first set. The second game, before any of the double faults, before the medical timeout, before the score had become remotely embarrassing. At the moment when she had just broken Eala's serve and held the early advantage, when she had absolutely zero strategic reason in the world to fake anything. The pain hit her on a forehand, and from that moment it began to build. She said clearly that it got progressively worse even when she wasn't using her left arm, even on shots that didn't involve that arm. Pain that spread and escalated independently of what she was doing on the court. And then she said the line that collapses the entire conspiracy. She said she would rather have finished the match and lost 6-love than retire. Those were her words. A Grand Slam champion saying she would have accepted the most humiliating possible scoreline on one of the biggest stages in the sport rather than walk off the court. That is not the statement of someone managing their reputation. That is the statement of a competitor
gets wined and dined by British high society, and leaves with a very favorable impression of both Denise personally and Bet.
The medical team
365 as a company.
She confirmed she was scheduled for an MRI the following day, a magnetic resonance imaging scan. You do not order an MRI for gamesmanship. You do not send a player to get a neurological workup because the scoreline was uncomfortable. The doctors who treated Gauf on the court and in the locker room were dealing with what appeared to be a genuine, unfamiliar,
this isn't some tech startup founder or inherited wealth situation. She built a betting company from scratch that now operates in dozens of countries and generates billions in revenue every single
4 years earlier in Cincinnati. She added the good news that the medical team did not believe it would be a long-term issue and that she hoped to be fit for the Miami Open the following week. But she was also completely honest about how frightening the experience had been. She used the word scary. She said she had never felt anything like it before in her career, and that the unfamiliar nature of the pain was precisely why she felt she had no choice but to stop. The WTA confirmed there was no investigation, because there was nothing to investigate. The accusations dissolved the moment they were held up against the actual medical reality of what had happened. But by that point, the damage to the discourse had already been done. The narrative had taken on a life of its own, and pulling it back required something the internet rarely offers: patience and a willingness to hear the full story before forming a verdict. Now here is where this story takes a different turn. Because while the conspiracy theories were spreading and the accusations were flying, something was happening on that court that deserved every single ounce of attention that was instead being directed towards speculation. Alexandra Eala was being extraordinary, not just in her tennis, in her character, in the grace and the class and the emotional intelligence she brought to a moment that could have overwhelmed her completely. Think about what this night meant for her. This was her tournament debut at the BNP Paribas Open, her first career match on Stadium 1. Not a side court, not a practice facility. Stadium 1 at Indian Wells Tennis Garden, one of the most storied venues in the sport. She was the first player from the Philippines ever to contest the main draw at this tournament. She had come into this match as the player who had been demolished 6-love in Dubai just 2 weeks earlier. And she was now walking off that court having won the opening set 6-2 and the first 2 games of the second set against the reigning French Open champion. And her first instinct in victory was not to celebrate herself. Her first instinct was to celebrate the women around her. In her on-court interview on International Women's Day, in front of thousands of fans, she said, and this needs to be heard in full, that she wanted to say thank you to all the incredible women who have paved the way and advocated for themselves and for other women. And then she turned toward the opponent she had just beaten and said that among those women is Coco. So thank you, Coco, for being an amazing competitor and an amazing role model. I really hope everything is well and you will recover soon. She called her opponent a role model, the player she had just beaten, the player some of her own fans were directing anger toward online in the very same moment. Eala chose grace. She chose gratitude. She chose to use her moment under the brightest lights she had ever stood beneath to honor the person across the net,